I'm at the top end of the Moor. I'm going to document this and show you what it's like now. I think this is called the Moor Head, this. I'm not 100% sure. But just here, it's been rebuilt. On the left hand side was red gates. So if you look at this white building and you go to the left, part of the white building was actually the old Red Gates toy store. Premier toy store, probably the best outside London. Now this redevelopment was supposed to actually be a cinema, but I've never seen a cinema in it since it's been redeveloped, so I don't know what's happening with that. It sort of got rebuilt during lockdown and then the cinema never appeared. Now across here is Debenhams. Now Debenhams closed in the second lockdown. The ceased trading. Now this is the second part of the redevelopment of Sheffield city centre. The first part was Heart of the City 1. This lot over here is probably Heart of the City 2 here. This is Grosvenor House, the new headquarters of HSBC, and it's a fraction of the size of the old HSBC I worked in at Griffin House on Tenter Street, Pennine Centre. But I don't think anybody's actually using Debenhams now. There's been talk of actually building more flats on the Moor, but I've not heard anything more on that. Like I said, this was the second part of the redevelopment of Sheffield city centre, and the big mistake is they shut a lot of the businesses down on here, and then they didn't get the investment money for a long time. And that meant a lot of businesses ended up closing down. So we now only really got the globalist type companies, the ones that are national or international. Back in the 70s you'd have lots of smaller businesses, Sheffield names. For example, Debenhams was called Pauldens, and that was a Sheffield company originally. Then it got bought out by Debenhams. There's not a great deal of footfall on here, and there was a picture circulating on the internet or on social media of the Moor in the 1970s. Now back in the 1970s you could drive up and down the Moor. Back in the 60s you could get a tram up and down the Moor. And it was so busy. Now the only positive development I believe there's been on the Moor since the redevelopment is the light cinema. Now they're not anything like the ABC or Gormont in size. They're only probably holding about 100 people in each cinema, but they're very comfortable seats, large seats, and the screens are big. So that to me is a really positive development on the Moor. Escalators up to the food place, I don't know if they survived. Now originally this was sold off, I didn't realise it till during the lockdown. It was sold on during lockdown for about £40 million this area. Prior to that it had been sold by the council for £90 million. I didn't realise the council had been selling off our assets to other companies. I'm always suspicious of that type of behaviour, and that does really concern me, that it's no longer an asset of people of Sheffield, it's a private area. So they could actually impose certain restrictions on here with it not really being a public area. So we have next here. Now it's not the next of the 1980s, that was quality, fashion, decent prices. Now I think it's pretty tacky. There's not much style to the stuff in next anymore, and pretty pricey. Not the next I love using in the 80s. But to say this is the second area of Sheffield that was developed, I'm not that impressed with it really, because other than the light cinema, putting a new surface down. And then the market area, that's really all that's happened on here. And what always gets up my goat is they've killed the Haymarket area of Sheffield by moving the markets down here. Now the markets around the Haymarket area were probably around there for 500 years from the old castle being down there. And some bright spark decided to build this new market area down here, and I think they doubled the rents on it, so a lot of the businesses would have gone out of business. It's not quite the same as the Haymarket, the Castle Market and the Sheaf Market. And just here we've got Atkinson's. So we've got Marks and Spencer's left on Fargate as a departmental store, and Atkinson's. Now Atkinson's was a local business, and it still is a local business, which is one positive thing. They tell me that there's going to be some major redevelopment for Atkinson's in the future, but it's not classy like it used to look, and it's pretty soulless inside now. Like you used to walk in the doorway and you got all the lights in the doorway. The exterior's looking a bit tacky now, but like I said, they're telling me there's going to be major redevelopment. I'll see it, believe it when I see it. You can see the market area down here. Fraction of the size of Old Castle and Sheaf Markets, and then the original Rag and Tag. The thing with Sheffield is people don't realise that Angel Street in Sheffield got hammered by the Germans. Then the bottom of High Street, that nearly 50% of the Moor was bombed in the Second World War, and then it's been completely redeveloped, so you'll not find an old building on the Moor at all. The oldest building had been the 1960s on the Moor. Another view of Atkinson there. One thing I remember is I worked in the bank for 15 years in Sheffield, but we were always rubbing shoulders with blue collar workers as well. So we were white collar workers and blue collar workers. Well, find me a blue collar worker in Sheffield city centre now. All round the backs of here was all light industry, and I remember the buffer girls having the lunch breaks in Sheffield, and that's only back in the 80s and 90s. The whole character of the city has been removed. They talk about diversity now, but Sheffield was a lot more diverse city back in the 50s, 60s and 70s. Not the diversity they want though, is it? Right at the bottom you can see a red brick building, which we knew was the Manpower building, and what they did is back in the 70s actually built that building, blocked all the traffic off into Sheffield up this road, and I think that was the start of the demise of Sheffield as a city centre. I've seen an old picture of it back in the 70s, and there was foot traffic down either side, packed. People crossing the road. There was cars coming up and down, but nothing, not high volume. There was no reason to shut the road off. But I think the agenda, the World Economic Forum and United Nations and the EU, this agenda's been out a long time to create smart cities in our city centre. But my question is, how long will the Moor last before they're actually ripping it up and greening it next? You know, it's just like they seem to have the money to waste, but they don't spend the money well. Like, for example, the original tram system in Sheffield covered most of the city, came out to the suburbs like Handsworth, etc. And then the new one, it only covers in a figure of 8, and then it goes down to Meadow and I think out to Rotherham. But it's nothing like the old tram system. And they're just, well, the punchline on that is I just think they wasted money on the super tram when they could have covered a lot more of Sheffield using the rail network. and a tram, hybrid type tram system. But that's Sheffield City Council for you. But so this is the actually updated part of the Moor. It's probably the most thriving part of Sheffield. Make your own judgment on it. I don't think the development's that great on it. I think it looks pretty tacky to me. This is the old market. Sorry, this is the market area. And like I said, I think it's a fraction of the size of the old market. So that's it. Just a quick snapshot of the Moor area of Sheffield. And tell me, what do you think of the Moor area?